Kipo and the Age of Wonder Beast follow up a great first season with a spectacular second one. But Deepcut and I had so much we wanted to know. Thankfully, we were able to get to talk to Rad and Bill, the show's two creators, to get some answers about Season 2 and the series as a whole. Unsurprisingly, this will be a spoiler interview, so make sure to check out the season before watching this. Also, while you're at it, check out Deepcut's Season 2 review and his follow-up video about what made this season of the show so unique for Western animation. With that being said, let's get into the interview. So Season 2 of Kipo and the Age of Wonder Beast just aired on June 12th on Netflix, and both of us saw it and we loved it. Deepcut even made a review, which everyone can check out after this. This is going to be a spoiler interview, so we're going to ask a bunch of questions about things that happened in Season 2 and, some stuff besides, their work on Kipo. So could you please both introduce yourself and your role on the show?
I'm Rad Seacrest, creator and executive producer.
I'm Bill Wolkoff, executive producer and writer. And if you hear a voice in the background running around, that's my 5-year-old who just watched the show.
Awesome. All right, are we ready to jump into questions, Haley?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so what was your process in deciding how individual animal societies would look? For instance, like raccoons living near the dump or cats living in trees. Seems like a very natural choice, but how did you develop the idea for like the bats wanting to live with aliens, or rats creating a theme park, or goats seeing a future through cheese?
It was kind of a fun group effort. Like in the writer's room, people would throw out ideas like maybe this or that. When we came into it, we had a couple that we had already come up with, like the raccoons and the cats. But the rats, I feel like you came up with the rats, right, Bill?
I think so. It was that might have been in the room, but to answer, I mean, yes, and it's like Rad's right. Like it was really a collective effort. Rad and I talked a lot in the very early development stages, and kind of an operating principle was, this is, all these mute societies arose over the ashes of humanity. But there's also this wonderful absurdity to all of them. So kind of knowing that allowed us to build out the world. And that was, that I think that helped us, gave us the borders of our sandbox in order to play and come up with and tap into the absurd part of our personalities to come up with these different creatures, but also, always keeping an eye that these creatures are co-opting the remains of humanity. Like as an example, I'll just give you one quick example. The Newton wolves. After Rad and I forget exactly where this came in, but what we realized was, I think it started with the drawing of Rads, just these wolves and these turtlenecks and blazers like Carl Sagan.
I was like a huge Carl Sagan fan.
But then thinking about that, it was like, okay, so they, we're basing this in Los Angeles, or our version, Las Vistas, our version of Los Angeles. They're probably, in the Griffith Observatory, or our version of that. So that led to this idea that, oh yeah, these wolves found a picture of Carl Sagan, up in the rubble up there, and just based their whole society off of him.
Wow. Is there a similar story for that with the bats? Those are the ones I'm most curious about, their fixation with aliens.
It's funny, at one point, we were talking about this the other day, Scarlemagne was almost a bat that wanted to drink wine, and humans were like a fine wine cellar, which I'm sure you could tell why they didn't want to go with that.
They had blood leeches as sommeliers. He had blood leeches as sommeliers. That didn't quite make it into the show.
But I had drawn that bat, and I was like, man, we got to figure out somewhere to use that. And I forget who came up with it. Somebody in the room came up with the sort of conspiracy theory, tinfoil hat wearing, believe in aliens, bats. I'm also a huge conspiracy theory fan, so as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh, yeah.
That's great. I love conspiracy theories.
We snuck some secret Illuminati messaging in there if you look hard enough.
I'll have to watch it again and see if I can catch that. That's fun. I'll make a video about that.
Nobody's caught that yet, or?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, you'll have to look for sure. So while we did get a lot of those animal societies in season 1, season 2 featured far fewer of them. Are there more big animal societies waiting for us in the city?
We can't really answer questions about the future. I'd love to see more, yeah.
Fair enough.
You know, it's interesting on a television series. Your first season, you are allowed to do a lot of stuff. In second season, you try to reuse a lot just from a technical standpoint. So that's why maybe in the second season you're seeing a little bit less of like going to new places or seeing a lot of new creatures.
I think that was something I really enjoyed about season 2 was, you know, a lot of cartoons would just kind of abandon those societies and never really bring them up again. But this makes the world feel like it's growing as opposed to just, you know, going in some straight line away from everything that you pass.
It's interesting how sometimes your limitations produce like an interesting thing that you may not have thought of, you know, but because of, well, you only get 2 new mutes or something. It's like, all right, well, then we're really going to focus on the ones we have.
Also, we don't want to run into the danger of the show feeling like, you know, mute of the week. And we wanted to really develop the world while having an eye on that this is a world that exists beyond the borders that we've created for the show. And we've thought about what's beyond those borders because that happens like when you're in a room talking for many, many, many hours.
Nice. So in season 2, we learned a lot about the mutants and how there seems to be one particular gene that mutated to cause this, as discussed by Kiko's parents. Is there a reason that humans seem to be the only thing immune to it when even microscopic beings like, you know, fungus or water bears aren't?
We never say in the show, and we did that purposely, like we don't want to say on the show. And I felt like every single person in the writer's room had their own strong opinion of what caused it. But we never say, it's almost like our characters don't know. So like, we don't want to tell the audience if the characters don't know.
Interesting. Good choice.
Yeah, so you did mention that you have thought about things beyond the city, and you know, if you can't say anything, but I guess you can't mention like, oh, could you talk about anything beyond the city? Or I guess, yeah, sorry, that question was because you said you're not sure if you can talk about things in the future, but you've thought about it, I guess.
I mean, I love the idea that whenever the series ends of doing things in other places in the world, like, you know, you could do a story about some people, like what's going on in Japan right now, or what's going on in Mexico, or, you know, and those are things we always talked about, but it had nothing to do within our show of Kipo.
We see the Great Mutant Outbreak as worldwide.
All right. So the show reminded me quite a bit of Japanese cartoons that were being imported a lot when I was a kid. Things like Digimon and Monster Rancher, where each week the characters would go to like a new animal society and get involved in their conflict. Were any of those shows an inspiration for this one? Were there any inspirations in particular you can cite for this show?
I mean, definitely Totoro. Definitely Spirited Away in terms of the design aesthetic. And Tekken Kinkri, another one in terms of design aesthetic. In terms of storytelling, I'm definitely like influenced by a lot of the types of storytelling in Japan. Like even Attack on Titan is a slight inspiration for the larger creatures.
Nice.
What about you, Bill? Like when you're writing, were you inspired by any Japanese stuff?
Definitely. I'm a child of the 80s, so I have, you know, my references go a little further back. And I was brought in after Rad had made his webcomic, and when we mind melded with each other, you know, I talked about a lot of the things that the webcomic evoked for me. A big thing for me was the 70s movie The Warriors, not an animated movie. That's Walter Hill's movie about this hyper-real nighttime in New York when it's all taken over. The whole island of Manhattan is taken over by themed gangs, and there's no, you know, real order between them. They're all kind of fighting amongst each other, and that, you know, that felt like what this surface had become. That wasn't just night on the surface. That was the last 200 years on the surface. So that was, that helped, I think, me and Rad figure out like what the city looked like and how things operated. And I love the movie Time Bandits so much. It has like this insanely absurd sense of humor. So that was a big inspiration for me for how far we could push the absurdity. And the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy books, that also in terms of the absurdity. And in both of those instances, like there's real absurdity, but things are grounded in just enough reality that you feel the life and death stakes to them. So that, of course, all the Mad Max movies and Up to Fury Road, in terms of like, always imagining like, what would this world look like 200 years from now? That, we tried to infuse that as, through our crew. So like everything looked insane and pushed as far as possible. Like in the Batcave, they've got piles and piles and piles and piles of TVs. They're not just, in some random cave. Like you see the remnants of our world there.
Awesome. So I had a question about a character that I'm sure a lot of people really love, and that's Mandu. And we were wondering if there's anything you could tell us about him. Is he just like a baby, or is he full grown?
I mean, she's definitely a baby.
Awesome.
You saw her putting the straws in to pretend like she had tusks.
Aww.
And she met she met other mutant pigs with with 4 eyes and 6 legs that are much bigger than her. And it's funny, like we always thought of her as a she and just kind of imbued that through the crew, but everybody always defaults her to a he for some reason.
I did the same thing. I was surprised.
I did that.
I think it's because just the name Mandu might really, man, kind of masculine. So one of my favorite things about season 2 was, of course, Scarlemagne's backstory. The first time I saw it, it felt like a pretty simple portrayal of, him feeling betrayed and then wanting to feel important because of that. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt like this was someone who was never the most important thing in anyone else's life. People go through their lives generally looking for a romantic partner to consider the most important person, and they have their kids, of course. But Scarlemagne was kind of stuck in these relationships where he wasn't the most important thing to anyone, so he had to sacrifice everything to maintain these relationships. Where you guys were going for with this, or is there more to that interpretation that I might be missing? And what were your thoughts when putting his character together?
I think that's really smart. I think you nailed it. He's essentially an orphan, like Kipo is when we first meet her in season 1. She's orphaned from her, not permanently orphaned, but orphaned from her dad and everything that she knows as the series opens, and you discover that he is too, in a way. And so there's a real sadness there. We just wanted a really awesome, unforgettable villain that could showcase great character design, a great performance, and be scary as hell, but also be real. And we wanted him to be personal to Kipo. When Rad and I first started talking about him, an idea we had that never quite made it in was that somewhere in season 1, Kipo would discover an old picture from, like her old burrow of her and her parents, the picture that she had never seen before. And Scarlemagne's there also, like not insane and mean, but like part of the family, like with his arms around them. And that was kind of what we took into the writer's room once we had a full crew and started talking that out. And that led, and then it was really our whole staff that helped us shape and mold his backstory. And Ben Meckler and Chris Amick, who wrote his backstory episode, I think they really did it beautifully.
It was really amazing to see something that was so nuanced, like not even just for a cartoon, but in writing in general. There's so many generic backstories, and this one, like as someone whose job it is to watch cartoons and like deconstruct the themes, it took me like a good day to really pick up on just how nuanced his journey was, and just how it's probably, I think, the greatest mad with power story I've ever seen, because it's so relatable. He just wanted to feel important to everyone because he was never that important to anyone. So just, no question there, just kudos on that. That was amazing.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll say just one more thing about him. Like the other thing behind him that we wanted was, it felt like he should like in this world there should be someone with an outsized resentment towards humans that would really pit him against Kipo. So like starting with that, but then discovering that he actually is essentially her brother was, we hope that we could play that out in a real way and make it poignant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those were some of my favorite episodes. Or learning about his backstory was definitely also something I loved from season 2. But one thing I was kind of hoping for that we would get in the season was a little more backstory, or some backstory for Benson. He's a fan favorite, obviously. And so I was basically wondering, is there something that we could look forward to learning about him in season 3 or beyond? Or if you didn't really think about that yet, do you plan on telling that story, I guess?
It's there's so many things you want to do in a 10 episode season. And I remember, Bill, you were fighting so hard to get one of the episodes to be all sort of Benson centric, and for whatever reason we just had to do something and we couldn't get it in, and because there's just so many moving parts, but I think that it would be interesting to explore more of Benson's backstory in the future.
We very much want to, and we've thought a lot about it, and we hope to get the opportunity to.
Awesome. That's what I wanted to hear for sure.
One amazing thing about the show was how you almost deconstructed certain ideas of childhood morality that is so prevalent in cartoons. Due to backlash from parents about violence in cartoons, back in like the 80s and such, a recurring theme has become that the hero has to teach a violent world to win battles with heart instead of power. But in the climax of season 2, we see people realizing she can't just use the power of friendship or love to save everyone, and she has to actually take down Scarlemagne or watch him hurt other people. It kind of gave this nuanced idea that, yes, the world needs a bit more understanding and a bit less violence, but that some people can't be reasoned with, at least in the moment, and it's okay to defend the people you love against them. How exactly did this ending of season 2 develop in the writer's room, and can we expect more deconstructions similar to this in future seasons, or...?
I want to credit you with really looking inside what we were trying to doing. I think you've hit on something. There's no easy answers to these bigger questions, and we wanted Kipo to be a relentless force of positivity, but we wanted to challenge that every step of the way by putting her in a world that would make 99.999% of us cynical, embittered, or just like throwing your hands up. I can't think about it, and I just can't care about it. And Kipo's the opposite of all of that. She cares deeply, and she's not cynical. And we wanted to see these two forces constantly pushing against each other. So that informed the ending a lot, very much in the writer's room. Like, how do you take this character and give her this very violent and very, very destructive power, but that temper that with the compassion that's so innate to her, and put her in the middle of a totally messed up world, a world that has the potential to be wonderful and amazing, but in its current state is messed up. So we put all those pieces in, baked them, and talked endlessly to see how they would come out of the oven of our story breaking process.
Well, it was an amazing job. Again, it was just so nuanced. Like, I can't wait to share this with like my nephews and nieces, just because it has so much depth to it. It doesn't necessarily treat them like they're adults. It just treats children like they're intelligent enough to understand that the world isn't just purely good if you see it that way. So again, thank you for that.
Thank you. Thanks for watching.
So besides the bats, do you guys have a favorite faction of mutes?
I mean, I'm always gonna have a soft spot for the Timbercats.
Yeah, the Timbercats are hard to beat. I mean, we love all of our children.
Yeah, I mean, part of me loves the Wolves just because we were able to get Jizza. I would want to hang out with the Wu-Tang all day.
The correct answer was goats.
Oh yeah.
Is that your favorite?
I just liked the psychic bit. The cheese was a little weird for me, but that scene where they're seeing the future and kind of predicting what's to come was really fun.
In my mind, I had a logic to it. Like, if you saw the water bears come alive, you know that there could be intelligence at a small scale. So if cheese is alive.
That makes a lot of sense, especially after meeting Fun Gus. So
Yeah.
That's really layered.
And I feel like fungus maybe floats around, or the spores. That's why it's so wise, you know, rather than it being like magic. In my mind, that's what it was.
That's actually really cool. Like, I would not have even guessed that. Hold up, we got a helicopter going by.
Like when you actually see it take the form of the jaguar, I figure that's it's actually intelligent or something.
The cheese.
Yeah, it's a great thing to know. That makes me love them even more, that they're also kind of working almost cross-species in a way, talking to the cheese, which is, fungus. That's clever. I like that. I've read in interviews that Kipo was not... Sorry, did you have something you were about to say?
Oh, I was just going to add another fun fact. I mean, admittedly, they are also... We borrow from the Weird Sisters trope that, goes all the way back to Macbeth and has been written about, in so many versions, including Sabrina. The latest Sabrina on Netflix has, a really messed up version of the Weird Sisters. And we kind of took a Golden Girls approach to it. Like, what if those Weird Sisters, like saw in a magazine about like retiring or imagine, since they're blind, retiring in Florida. And it just seemed like a fun way to play off of a trope that we've seen before.
That was one of my favorite bill pitches coming in the morning, and I think you thought of it that night. We would get in pretty early, right? Get oatmeal at like 8 or 9 or something. You're like, okay, what if they're like the Golden Girls hanging out on the lanai, and they got their patio furniture, and I was just like, oh, hell yeah, that's genius. I'm going to go draw that right away.
That actually raises a question real quick. Is there a backstory behind them being blind? Is there maybe not explored in the show, but something that's canon in your guys' head?
It's definitely the archetype of the 3 blind witches.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's inspired by that trope, but I think it's because they've been around for a really long time. So eyesight tends to go once in your old age.
Cool. So I've read in interviews that Kipo was not supposed to be a mute in the original webcomic, but from what pages we could find of it, she still had pink skin and hair. Was there a different reason for this in the comics?
In the comic, everyone just had interesting coloring. Kind of like The Simpsons, they're yellow, or remember that show Doug? People were green, or any random color. So it was in the comic book, it was just purely a style.
Interesting. Okay. See, because she was different from like Wolf or Benson, I originally assumed that that's just what people underground looked like after not having light for 2 or 3 years. And then I was like surprised when I saw her dad. So,
Brad, on your Twitter, I believe you talked about the idea for a movie featuring Wolf taking care of little wolf children, but you didn't mention Kipo in it. Do you think she would still be in it, or would she be prevalent, or? How much you care?
Yeah, I think if we ever got a chance to do any kind of spin-offs, like I'd love to do a Wolf movie. I'd love to do a Young and Hammerpaw, a Benson movie. I feel like you'd have to check in with your favorite characters in those.
So I believe it was on your Twitter, Bill, that you said something about Benson being 16. Is he still 16 in the show, or, yeah?
We've always seen him as 16, as a little bit older than Kipo and Wolf.
Mhm.
So this is a bit tangential, a bit of a compliment and a question again. But one thing I really appreciate about Benson's character in particular was he wasn't defined by his gayness. And I think right now we're seeing a lot more diversity in TV and movies, which is great. But you're often seeing his characters do nothing outside of their minority status, whereas this show is just filled to the brim with real people. Oh, did it just close on us?
Let's see.
And it's been
No, they
upgraded.
just gave me a gift and made it endless timing on.
Okay, sorry, there's a
I
little
don't know
pop-up
what.
there. So like, with Benson in particular, no, he's gay, but he's not defined by that. Even when he comes out, it was just to clarify to Kipo as opposed to him feeling like that is something that needs to be said. And even like his most important relationship that we see within the show is, with his little mute friend who he's so close with that they have the same fantasy together. Like even in fantasy, they can't be separated. Was that intentional on your guys' part? How did that come about to have, it sounds weird asking, how is it that we have this character that's a real character, but it feels so rare to me?
I mean, the original inception for it is I always noticed people saying ignorant things. And I felt like a lot of times in media, there's not a lot of portrayals of like, wow, that dude's like the coolest dude ever. And then like someone you could kind of, like if you're a kid, like a role model, you're like, wow, I think that character's awesome. And then as a kid going, oh, and they're gay? Like, I just felt like there wasn't a lot of that, So
what I want to say is it doesn't feel like he's compensating in that way either, though. Like I've seen a lot of portrayals of gay characters where they go a little over the top trying to make them, cool and relevant as well. But here it was just like, here's a guy that just loves bubbly water, listening to music and hanging with his pal, and he's also just happens to be gay. It felt like really the most perfect balance I've seen.
I think it also is a reflection of a lot of our friends. Like, I mean, we obviously work in an art industry. We work with a lot of gay people, and it also just didn't seem like there was a lot of media reflecting the people we knew, like the people like Benson, it just, there's not a lot of representation in that area. So it seemed like an opportunity for something cool to put in.
If you think of the show as 200 years ago there was the Great Mutant Outbreak, so it's 200 years ago, which is essentially today, October 2020, frozen in time. So we wanted it to reflect the world that we know today, and we wanted it to populate this world with characters that that are in our lives that are not necessarily represented in kids animation. So that was kind of the approach to it, and it was also, we've said this in a couple of interviews, but the studio, I'll say it again, the studio really encouraged us to explicitly present Benson as an out gay character. And that was great because it allowed us to just make him a real person. And that's not, like you said, it's not what defines him, but it is very much a part of him. And we're kind of lucky in that regard because I'm sure that, I've heard stories like people who tried to do similar things.
I've been on productions where that's happened, where like they try to do something and even the manager who is gay is like, they're not letting us do this. You know what I mean? Like, even in like a studio execs, like they're worried about this and that we can't, it's like, it's interesting that the times have changed where our executives were like, yeah, go for it.
It's amazing. Again, it's a great character. It doesn't feel like he's pandering, but it doesn't feel like he's being dismissed either. It's just a great balance.
Thanks.
It's awesome to see this. You know, how you said it's times are changing and you're able to do this much more easily. So thank you guys so much for your time and talking to us and answering all of our strange questions.
Cool.
Pleasure.
Anything
Awesome.
else?
It was great meeting you guys. I love the show. Can't wait for season 3.
Cool.
Cool.
Gosh, good to meet you guys.
Mhm.